Hello, class. Welcome back from winter break. I hope all of you got some good rest. I know that I tried. But the semester's returned, and like the protagonist of today's manga, we must return to studying the fascinating subject of psychology. That's right, today we're diving into Koyama's one-shot, The First Love Psychology. Don't worry if you didn't do the reading this time around, there are no spoilers ahead. For those of you who did skip the text, The First Love Psychology is the story of two college students. Harada, a first-year business student, and Kodama, a third-year psychology student. The two meet and, of course, fall in love, and they discuss some social psychology along the way. Social psychology is my specialty, so of course I had to talk about it. The first thing that we hear about is called the bystander effect. Kodama gets interested in Harada because Harada goes out of his way to help Kodama, even though he doesn't know him and he's in a busy subway station. The reason Kodama's surprised is because he knows about the bystander effect. The bystander effect, also known as bystander apathy, was named by John Darley and Bib Latané in 1968 after they heard about the murder of Kitty Genovese. After Kitty was murdered, an article came out claiming that about 40 people witnessed her being stabbed but didn't do anything to help her. It turns out this actually wasn't true. Quite a few people did try to call the police or tried to help in other ways. There's a whole documentary about it if you want to watch it. I highly recommend it. But anyway, just because Miss Genovese's case isn't a great example of the bystander effect, doesn't mean that the bystander effect doesn't exist. The bystander effect is a phenomenon where the likelihood that somebody is going to help someone in distress is inversely proportional to the number of people in the area. You're way more likely to help someone who's dropped their stuff if you're the only person around. But if you see somebody slumped over on a bench in a busy train station like Harada did, the vast majority of people won't bother helping. There are a lot of reasons for this. I think the biggest one is something called diffusion of responsibility. Diffusion of responsibility is the kind of thing that bites you in the butt when you're working on group projects. The more people there are, the more likely anyone's going to think, hey, there's plenty of other people around, so somebody else can do it. It's not my job, and besides, I have other things to do. This mindset can be pretty dangerous. If everybody thinks somebody else is going to help that guy who looks real sick in the subway, 9 times out of 10, no one's going to help him. On the other hand, if you're all alone, you can't assume that somebody else is going to step in, so you're more likely to help. So, a hot tip from Professor Akamon to you. If you're ever in a situation where you need help in a crowd but nobody seems to want to help, there's a trick you can use to minimize the bystander effect. First of all, don't just call 911, you have to pick a specific person. For example, you with the pink hair, call 911. That way, you clarify that you do need help and you assign them a job and specific responsibility. It's no longer everybody's problem, it's that specific person's responsibility. Just keep doing this as much as you can. There's a lot of research showing that this is a great way to overcome the bystander effect if you are in trouble in a crowd. There are also certain people who seem a little less prone to getting stuck up in bystander apathy. For example, those who know that it's a thing. So, psychologists and psychology students like Kamado. My undergrad social psychology professor used to tell a story about how he was at a conference and somebody fell in the back of a crowded room. All the psychologists, not wanting to get someone to get hurt because of bystander apathy, rushed to help. So if you're aware of it, if you're aware that this is a problem, you're more likely to do something. Anyway, for someone who knows exactly how rare it is for people to help a complete stranger in a crowd, it's no surprise that Kamado's impressed by Harada. The second major social psychological finding Kamado mentions is the halo effect. The halo effect is the name that we use to describe how, when somebody has one positive trait, we tend to assume they have other positive traits as well. For example, people who are attractive are also often perceived as kinder, smarter, and more successful than people who are less attractive. This kind of thing actually seeps into character design. If you go on TV tropes, you could look at the tropes for beauty equals goodness, evil makes you ugly, and good scars, evil scars. They're all kind of revolving around this halo effect. Kamado is worried that Harada only likes him because he made a good first impression, which kicked off the halo effect. So, this means that he thinks Harada only likes him because he's stuck on a shallow first impression and isn't actually seeing the real him. Psychologists. Speaking of being a psychologist, Kamado's pretty lucky. It looks like his university offers research opportunities to undergraduate students. He's doing a psychology research project of his own, collecting survey data. It's true that a lot of psychology research is done through surveys, but the amount depends on the subdiscipline. Clinical psychology, of course, does use surveys, but it also uses things like clinical assessments and brain scans and a bunch of other techniques. Cognitive psychology also uses surveys, but it also uses other things like the Stroop task or memorization tasks. Community psychology uses surveys along with community interventions, and social and personality psychology also use these kind of things along with behavioral experiments. Out of all of them, I'd say social and personality probably use the most surveys. Don't quote me on this, it's just a guess. Kamado does say that the bystander effect was first demonstrated in a survey, but that's actually not the case. Social and personality psychologists do use other techniques, and the bystander effect was first demonstrated by some behavioral studies. Anyway, the reason that psychology uses so many surveys is because we're usually trying to measure stuff you can't use a ruler for. You can't weigh happiness, and you can't calculate the mass of anxiety. We call these kind of vague psychological concepts that you can't directly measure constructs. The way we usually measure them, like scales in a survey, so a bunch of questions in a survey that, like Koyama mentions and uses, are called operationalizations. Operationalizations are proxy measures of things that you can't measure directly. They end up giving you a number that represents depression or love or friendship. The questions that make up a scale kind of represent the larger concept. That's why Kamado's comparing a scale that's designed to measure friendship and a scale designed to measure romantic love to try and figure out what sets them apart. I wouldn't recommend this, though. Just reading the questions on some scales is not a great way of figuring out your feelings, and it is not what they're designed to do. Poor Kamado is also kind of stuck in the past as far as collecting surveys is concerned. Thank goodness, not thank goodness for Kamado, but thank goodness for psychology researchers. In the past, we definitely do what Kamado did and handed out paper packets of surveys, and then we would painstakingly enter all the responses from those surveys into a computer by hand so we could analyze the data. Luckily for us, we don't have to do that anymore. Most of us use online survey platforms like Qualtrics, SurveyMonkey, and RedCap to collect data. These automatically put the data into an Excel sheet so we don't have to enter it by hand. This gives us a lot more times to work on things like grant writing, research, and teaching. It also allows us to avoid things like what Harada did when he just wrote stuff all over his survey that shouldn't have been there. You can't use that data at all. Yeah, it's a cute thing to do, and Kamado totally got a boyfriend out of it, but personally, I would never date someone who provided unusual data. That could be more the exception than the rule. If you want to be my lover, you gotta provide me valid and replicable data. Anyway, The First Love Psychology is a super cute story, and I totally recommend it if you're into that kind of thing. It's available in English on Futakia. That's it for now. The First Love Psychology is great, and my lesson's over. As usual, if you have a topic or anime you want to see me cover, please drop it in the comments. Take care, and I'll see you next class.